Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Han Talks First. I'm Han, the captain of this podcast, and this is the podcast you're looking for, as Obi-Wan Kenobi once told me. So today we're talking about Mandalorian, Season 3, Episode 4. Significant improvement from last week's, and a little surprise appearance from a new Jedi who no one really saw coming. So we're going to talk about that, and also a little bit about how the viewership ratings for The Mandalorian have dropped considerably since not only season 3, but season 2, but also from the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more right here on Han Talks First.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
So if you haven't guessed by now, we're doing this episode live. Again, I thought I'd give it another shot. We've done 3 of these episodes live so far. And really, it's just about saving time for me. There's no real secret magic trick for this at all. But we're doing it live. So if there's mix-up or mistakes when I speak, that's why it's not edited out. So I apologize. So episode 4, it's finally here. We got to see how Grogu was saved from the Jedi Temple. And it was a good episode, it was much better than last week's. Last week's was good. It wasn't great, but there was some pacing issues for me, and the A and B plot storylines didn't really feel coherent. But this one was a lot better. It focused on there was a A and B plot in this one too. Obviously, the Grogu rescue, which was a past previously on type recap thing, and then of course it was the new Mandalorian youngling was taken by a gigantic dragon bird, once again showing that this episode is kind of like a monster of the week type show, which I'm down for. I like. That's what season 2 essentially was, and that's what this one has come to as well. And it starts off with the training process, the training of the younglings, and just overall combat training for all the Mandalorians in this small little covert that they have. And every time I saw Din and Bo speaking to Grogu, I really felt like they were mommy and daddy, I don't know if that's what this show is setting up or not, and I'm not saying I really care about that, but everyone calls Din daddy, Daddy Pedro. Well, why don't we start calling Bo mommy? I mean, she's got big MILF energy, if you know what I'm talking about. But it was really cool to see that they're working together. And a little bit later in this episode, we got to see some hints as to what Bo-Katan is potentially going to bring to the table regarding her own projections on what she wants to accomplish in this series with Mandalore and the Mythosaur and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see that development play out. So let's talk about the giant elephant in the room here, and that is Ahmed Best. Ahmed Best. The hell, he was even given the name Best because that's what he is all the way from birth. He made the surprise appearance as Jedi Master Beck, who was also in a little Star Wars game show that was on Disney Plus. I didn't watch it. It was something like Jedi Trials or along those lines of a show. But he played a character there, and he was brought back, and everyone celebrated. They were like, "Yay! He's got a role that isn't so annoying and dumb." And well, now he's in an actual show, in the actual narrative of Star Wars, playing something other than an annoying, goofy adjacent figure. So it was great to see. And he is a master Jedi. I mean, he was wielding 2 at a time. He was taking down clones, all this stuff, and it really made me happy to see this happen. And we're going to check out an article from Variety talking about Ahmed Best's appearance and how it was such a surprise and they kept it such a secret. But before we do, I want to mention, I made an Instagram story about this, but I wanted to say it on the actual podcast, and that is about spoilers. What the hell is wrong with everybody? I had this episode spoiled for me. Like 5 minutes after it aired, I didn't have time to watch it on Wednesday night, so I had to wait actually until Friday to watch it. But somebody posted immediately in the thumbnail on YouTube a picture of Ahmed Best in Jedi robes. I didn't need any other context except that to know, damn, he's the Jedi that rescued Grogu. Right there, right then, I know. It's obvious. And then other people would have Jar Jar in the thumbnail, and it's like, why is Jar Jar trending again? You know, there's no need for that to happen, but sure enough, Ahmed Best is in it. And I just want to say, you know, I get it. You want to get clicks and likes and attention, and you know, sometimes it's a mistake if you post it, but that's okay. But if you're doing it intentionally to ruin something for somebody else, that's when you're an asshole, and I hate you for it. If this episode hadn't have been spoiled for me, it would have been a really, really nice surprise. But unfortunately, I didn't get that same impact that I did watching Luke come back in season 2, you know, or Ahsoka. I mean, we knew Ahsoka was coming beforehand, but the way it was done, you know, in this one, I was like, oh, okay, I know when the doors open, Ahmed Best's face is going to be looking at me. There was no wow factor. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was so great to see him, but I really, really wish people would stop with the spoilers. With something like streaming, you got to give it at least a day. At least a day. I mean, the show drops at midnight. That's probably another reason why their viewership is declining, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, but they got to stop dropping these at midnight. It's really annoying. It's super annoying. So let me try and see if I can share my screen here. And we're going to talk about this Variety article that came out shortly after The Mandalorian dropped. And this is about, this is by Jordan Moreau from Variety. And here is what they have to say. So, Jar Jar Binks actor Ahmed Best makes surprise Star Wars return as a Jedi in The Mandalorian. In a surprise cameo that nobody in the galaxy far, far away saw coming, Jar Jar Binks actor returned to the universe on Wednesday's episode of The Mandalorian. But instead of playing the infamous Gungan, he made a return as a Jedi named Kalaran Beck. In the newest episode titled The Foundling, Best appears briefly in a flashback in Order 66 when the clone troopers betrayed the Jedi and ruthlessly murdered nearly everyone. Best Jedi Knight Kelleran saves a young Grogu who found himself alone facing a group of clone troopers. He saves the little alien and dispatches the enemies with his 2 lightsabers, allowing Grogu to escape with him on a ship. And the episode ends without showing where Kelleran and Grogu fly off to, opening up the possibility of Best to reappear later on. And I hope he comes back. That would be really great. You know, another special thing about these episodes is the crew. The crew. I'm not talking about Favreau and Filoni or the actors. I'm talking about the actual people that make the show, that make this possible. They don't say anything. They didn't jump out there and, you know, leak this information or show photos from the day that Ahmed was there. Everyone knows how special it is to keep these things, you know, close to the vest until it's time to actually premiere. And that's what I wish that other people in this podcast space would do, people online, what they would do, because it really is, it's so important when we get to experience it for the first time on screen. But kudos to Ahmed Best. I think he will come back. I hope he comes back anyway, because that would be really, really cool. Excuse me for 1 second while I change my screen here, because I'm trying to do multiple things at once, because I wanted to bring up this whole issue with The Mandalorian having poor viewership, which is kind of fascinating, but also it makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to share here why. So let me switch the screen to show a different article. This one is going to be from Screen Rant. And I apologize to the podcast listeners. I know this is kind of annoying listening to me work this at the same time, but bear with me. Here it is. Okay, so let's talk about this article. The Mandalorian Season 3 premiere's viewership is disappointing to Disney. Third-party analytics have revealed that The Mandalorian Season 3's viewing figures, but they likely fall somewhat short of Disney's hopes for Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni's Star Wars. The first season of The Mandalorian released alongside the launch of Disney Plus, becoming a cultural phenomenon. Engaging with season 2 was just as high and skyrocketed after Luke Skywalker's cameo in the season finale set an internet ablaze. No doubt Disney hoped The Mandalorian season 3 would reach similar heights, but sadly it doesn't seem to be the case. So let me talk about that real quick, because it was brilliant to release Disney Plus with a flagship series of The Mandalorian. And part of that's benefit of why its viewership was so high was because it was the only thing on Disney Plus at the time. Yes, they had their catalog of old library content and cartoons and animations and all that kind of stuff, but as far as new premiere content, this was the only one. It was premium release strategy, and it helped the viewers. And not only that, but they had this adorable little creature, Grogu, to join them. This guy on my left. So yes, and then the engagement grew with season 2 because obviously it just got better. It got better, and then with the addition of Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill coming in, made it even better. We had people, the viewership for season 2 finale was grander than any of its viewership throughout the run of the series so far. But then it tanked. Why is that? I have my own theories, but let's take a look at the rest of this article. Streaming services, I don't know if you can read this on the, here we go. Streaming services don't tend to release viewing figures, meaning that third-party analytics are the closet to accurate figures it's possible to get. And the Wrap published data from Samba TV estimating that The Mandalorian Season 3's premiere was watched by just under 1.5 million households. As noted by The Direct, this is comparable with other Disney Plus TV shows. The Book of Boba Fett was 2% higher with 1.5 million views, and Obi-Wan Kenobi was dramatically outperformed The Mandalorian Season 3 by a massive 28%. And the most uncomfortable comparison with The Mandalorian Season 2 premiere, which was around 25% higher. Okay, this is not really a surprise to me because Obi-Wan is a legacy character, and from both eras of the Star Wars trilogies. So it was expected that that series was going to perform very well. I actually said before the show came out that they were marketing it really poorly because they didn't know, they had no idea what they had in their hands, how significant Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, was going to hit the hearts of so many fans out there. And sure enough, they didn't believe it, but it was the highest rating views for any Star Wars TV show. So there you go. And then the show came out and I realized, okay, maybe they didn't market it that much because it's actual shite. And it's not that great, you know. And you also had Darth Vader, and promise of lightsaber battles. So who's not going to tune in for that? Even if it sucks. It's lightsabers, it's Darth Vader, it's Obi-Wan. It's amazing, right? So there's that. And I think they should consider that going forward with future projects. You kind of need lightsabers in Star Wars. You kind of need the Force in Star Wars. You kind of need mythology in Star Wars. Mandalorian has one of those, mythology. The Force, kind of adjacent, I would say. But lightsabers, I know we got the dark saber, but I think we can do a little bit better. And then the Book of Boba Fett, don't even get me started on that. I can't talk about it. So let me continue with this article here. With these viewing figures in mind, it's worth exploring The Mandalorian Season 3 viewership is comparatively lower than its peers. It's important to begin stressing that the context, Mandalorian Season 1 premiere was essentially the flagship show that launched the entire Disney Plus, explaining its cultural impact and high viewership. Literally what I just said. Almost verbatim. The Book of Boba Fett was likely bolstered to its inclusion in the legacy character in the same way the return of Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor meant Obi-Wan Kenobi felt like essential viewing. Okay, that's exactly what I said too. That's essentially the whole entire article. Okay, so it doesn't really get into why. Why did these shows perform so well and why Mandalorian is kind of tanking a little bit? Well, a part of it is you released the Book of Boba Fett, which was terrible. That was awful. The worst Star Wars television ever. I haven't spoken to anyone who actually likes the Book of Boba Fett. And if they do a season 2, I might just shave my head bald. I might do it. I might shave my entire body bald. I'll just be a walking flap of skin. Nobody wants that. No. So don't make Boba Fett season 2. Nobody wants it. But that character, that series, Boba Fett, was bolstered up because of his inclusion in the Mandalorian series. And he was really great in Mandalorian season 2. Really, really great. But then for some reason, they totally swapped this character's entire complex and made him something completely different in the Book of Boba Fett, which makes no sense to me to this day. So who knows? And Obi-Wan we kind of already talked about. But what happened with both those shows is they were significant steps down in quality from The Mandalorian, what it had been. And it actually got worse. Mandalorian was good. Season 2 was great. And then they come out with this new show, and it's kind of a letdown. And then they come out with another one, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's even more of a letdown because of the previous show's quality decline. And so what happens is, in generic public eyes, well, it's just not getting any better. And it's also hard to understand the timeline for a generic audience member, like the general public or whatever. But that's what happens when you make things that just keep declining in quality. The viewership for its next installment is going to see some pain. But to have a 29% drop in viewership, that's significant. That's significant data. And we could also bring in the animated shows like The Bad Batch. However, I don't think that's really relevant. But if you wanted to talk about it, The Bad Batch, their viewership is the worst of all. I mean, it wasn't even until season 2 that they completely fell off of the Nielsen charts. And the Nielsen charts is a way, it's similar to Samba TV. They gather metric data for streaming shows or television. But the fact that 2 weeks into The Bad Batch, it completely fell off the charts means that there was less than 500,000, maybe even 250,000 people viewing it each week, which is not good at all. So there's that. But how can we get the viewership back? That's the question. I want to actually bring up one more issue with why I think the ratings have dropped so much. And that revolves around little Grogu here. We all know that he made a feature in the Book of Boba Fett show along with Din Djarin and also Luke Skywalker. But it was so shoehorned in that no one really understood that they were going to appear and why it was going to connect. And it just took Boba Fett out of it for 2 episodes and yada, yada, yada. We all know. But the big significant change here is that we closed out Grogu's story and Luke's story together in the Book of Boba Fett. And general audiences who may not tune into that because they didn't know Din or Grogu were going to be in it, they're totally lost with the story. And season 2 of Mandalorian, that finale, it was a great finale. But it felt like a series finale instead of a season finale. It was that good. And if you think about the whole purpose of the Mandalorian show for the first 2 seasons, it was getting Grogu to his people. That was the whole premise. He found this lost youngling, and his charge was to get him back to his people. That's the entire premise of The Mandalorian. And it finished it. It beat the premise. And now in season 3, what they're trying to do is set up a new premise, which is still a little vague at the moment. There's a couple different threads that they could attack, but it is a little vague on what the actual premise of the show is today. But I think that hurt the viewership as well, too. And also, it took them 2.5 years to get season 3 off the ground. That's a significant piece of time to wait, especially when the audience was conditioned every year they would get a season of Mandalorian. So there's so many different factors to play in. But the fact that Variety and MovieWeb, Screen Rant are all reporting about these viewership ratings by Samba TV, it really makes you wonder, is Disney worried? I know Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni's, they're not worried. The creators, the directors, they're not worried because they've already started writing season 4 and doing pre-production, and we're going to get it next year, so we don't have to worry too hard about that. But the executives with Disney and Disney Plus, they're having significant issues right now with their output for Disney Plus. They're overspending because they did not anticipate when they would start receiving profit or any type of revenue, cash flow from this streamer, which actually wasn't even set to make a profit until 2024. So they kind of jumped the gun on how much money they had invested into it. That's a whole nother podcast. But I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. You know, it's a lot. It's a lot. But why is the viewership dropping so much? Almost a third. Almost 1/3 of the amount of viewers have dropped out of watching The Mandalorian. It's a little scary. They're not going to cancel the show, obviously. It's Disney Plus. Disney Plus is The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is Disney Plus. But the good news is the quality's there. I think the show is still really good. Season 2 is the best for me, but the quality is still here. So let's continue with the story here. We got a little bit more with Bo. Bo taking an initiative to be a part of this clan, to be a part of the Children of the Watch. So I'm still a little confused if she is accepting the way of these Mandalorians or if she's still using it to her advantage to try and get something out of them a little bit later on, or if she's scared. But we saw her take a lot of initiative in this episode to go after that missing child, to save him from that giant bird. And I think a part of her really loved being in charge again and having people follow her again, because that's who she is. She's a leader. You know, she's not a follower. She wants to take command. She wants to rule. And I feel like if she doesn't eventually end up fighting this clan of Mandalorians, this watch, this convert, whatever. See, live show. If she doesn't end up fighting them in the end, she'll probably be leading them. Who knows? Maybe she defeats the armorer. Maybe she kills her and starts leading them her way. Who knows? It's a fascinating concept, which I can't wait to see play out. And Grogu's relationship with the armorer, speaking of, I loved. The armorer accepts Grogu for who he is and also made him his little medallion that he'll grow into one day with his little signet, which was so freaking adorable. I loved it. And Bo-Katan, she also showed initiative to the armorer by bringing in, quote, foundlings. Remember at the end when she said, I had 3 more foundlings to bring into our clan. And these little baby, ugly, naked mole rat birds came out of the plane. And the plane. I called a Star Wars ship a plane. I should be excommunicated from Star Wars fandom. I apologize. But part of that is showing that, hey, I know the way, the creed. You know, if there's a foundling in need, you bring them in and you take care of them. So obviously they're birds. They're not going to frickin' become Mandalorians. But it's her showing that initiative, kind of winning them over in a way. And how about that last shot? The last shot when she is like, you know, I saw one. What if I really did see a mythosaur? And the armorer's like, this is the way. And then that this last shot was the shot of this episode. Yes, Ahmed Best was great, but the last shot, and over the shoulder of Bo-Katan looking at the mythosaur totem up on the wall. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about what her plans are. This shot speaks so much about Bo-Katan's methods and what she plans to do. She's going to ride that damn mythosaur. She's going to freaking do it. She's going to ride it like she just bought it dinner, if you know what I'm talking about. I heard some people speculate that Din Djarin is going to become the Mandalore, the one who rides the mythosaur, since he also wields the saber. And it makes sense because the show is called The Mandalorian. The show is about Din. But then again, the Mandalorian could be plural as well. So who knows? But there's some kind of interesting dichotomy that is going to build between Bo, Din, and Moff Gideon, who clearly all 3 share a common interest, and it has to do with Mandalore. Din is kind of recalcitrant about becoming a leader. He's not a leader. He's not. He's a caretaker, yes. But when it comes to gathering a group of individuals and articulating and exploiting them of their talents, that's something he's not strong at. So I don't think he even wants to become the Mandalore. So I really think Bo is the one. And Moff Gideon, I'm kind of shocked we haven't seen him yet. We're halfway through this season and he hasn't come up yet, which leads me to speculate next week or this upcoming week, I bet you we'll see Moff. We probably will. And how about Carl Weathers? He did a great job directing this episode, I think. You know, he is a great director in his own right. He's done a lot of stuff in the past, but this one was really great. Better than his previous episodes that he's directed of The Mandalorian. Not to say they were bad, but he did a great job, you know? And just seeing Ahmed, that really made it so special, you know? It was so great to see him again. But honestly, that's all that I wanted to chat about today. We talked about the review, about the ratings, how they're dropping significantly. Can they go back up? Does Star Wars only need to rely on cameos to survive? I really hope not, because part of what makes Star Wars so special back when it was just movies was every movie was a brand new set of characters with interesting stories. But what was most important was the narrative. And I think being 4 episodes into The Mandalorian and not knowing what the premise of the show is anymore, that might be another factor on why its viewership is declining. So hopefully by next week, we can figure that out. But that's the show for today, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you're enjoying The Mandalorian. Be sure to like, subscribe, do all that crap. Comment down below what you think of this week's episode. You can also find me on Instagram, and just Instagram. That's all. That's the only social media I have. And obviously, if you're watching the video, check out the audio platforms, most specifically Spotify, where we upload all the time, even do video. We were one of the first people doing video on Spotify, by the way. The first one in the first 10. Can you believe it? After Joe Rogan. We were one of the first, which is kind of cool. But that's it. So I'll see you guys next week, and check out some other videos coming to the channel tomorrow because there's a lot of interesting Star Wars stuff going on. But until then, my friends, somehow, some way, somewhere this week, may the Force be with you.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.